My name is Solomon. I'm 18. I'm an artist who mainly works with mixed media, particularly with acrylic on board, but I'm hoping to expand into other areas such as like performance and maybe sculpture as well. Yeah. The archive visit was great. It's not really something that I knew existed within the sphere of the library. I mean, like obviously certain areas have archives and everything, but yeah, it wasn't something that I was super knowledgeable about, and it was kind of cool being able to, have essentially like a guided tour through the history of Hobart and everything else. I think there was a certain segment in the tour where we were actually able to flip through some of the physical archives. One of the really interesting ones was it was a whole bunch of old posters from the theaters back from, I can't remember what dates, but quite old, and that was quite cool. I can't say that there was a specific archive that captured what I was trying to do. It was more the process of searching for the archives that led to my overall to the meaning of the artwork that I ended up making. It was kind of that search for information rather than any bit of information I found itself. I think originally my idea for the work was for it to be based around the perceived progression of fundamental moral values in Hobart. Because for me, if you look at what an archive is, it's a very factual snapshot of certain areas throughout different periods. But it became quickly apparent that a lot of what goes into the archive, or what is deemed as valuable information, is dictated heavily by current political environments or societal shifts and everything else. So I tried to depict that, I guess, and in a slightly political lens, I suppose. A lot of the archives that I was actively searching for were depictions of traditionally oppressed groups of people, or subjects that were under intense political discussion or scrutiny, and I wanted to talk about that moral progression as a perceived thing rather than something that tangibly occurred. I wanted to sort of question the viewer's own interpretation of where Hobart stands now and our ties to certain political environments and everything else, as well as what it once was. Up until the point of the actual exhibition, I had little to no experience working with three-dimensional objects at all. Most of what I did was depicting scenes and everything else like that, and layering and patterns within those scenes. So it was quite difficult translating that onto something that was three-dimensional, but I felt it was pretty fitting to take something like found objects, because ultimately what I'm depicting is places and the not just so much the conceptual shift, but also the physical shift of those areas. And I think there's a lot of meaning and information that certain objects can hold. So a lot of it was, layering certain pieces of or symbolic objects onto one another, smearing paint on it, actually getting certain parts of the archives themselves, printing them out, maybe some parts of collage where I was editing text and crossing certain faces out, or one that kind of stuck out to me, I guess. There was a photo of I can't remember, I think his name was Rodney Kroom or something like that. It was a very famous event in Salamanca where a gay man was being arrested during one of the markets, and I crossed out the cop's face and circled the activist. Yeah, it was a lot of it was a big mishmash of painting and objects and kind of piling it into one another. I wanted to capture some of that chaos, I guess. Yeah, I think my work tries to understand a lot of Australian dynamics, I guess, cultural dynamics, which I think are inherently like satirical themselves. It's pretty hard to take any of it too seriously, but I think kind of going back to making people question their own identity or cultural values, I think the best way of doing that is through pointing out the extremes of certain value systems and everything else, and just to point out just how ridiculous that is, especially Australia's relation to expansion, industrialization, suburbia, suburban sprawl, and I think Tasmania's a sort of a microcosm for that, where it's constantly teetering on the edge between preserving traditional Tasmania, which is heavily tied to nature and the environment, and there's also that creeping part of suburbia, which you're starting to see more often. So just trying to make a commentary on that, I guess, yeah. He wasn't someone that I was familiar with directly, but I recognized his work almost instantly when I saw it. His like sculptural understanding, and also he was very quick with the conceptual side and helping me build that up to something that was a bit more palatable for the populace, which is cool. Because again, it was a medium that I was completely unfamiliar with. So he was great. He allowed me to use his studio space, which was awesome because it was with the sculpture the size of it had a lot of obstacles, I guess. So it was awesome. Yeah, he was the little space, the Good Grief Gallery, it's a good spot where most artists pass through or have some sort of connection to. It was nice being able to talk to different people and grow connections based off of that. Yeah, it was quite funny, especially the days leading up to the actual install. It's a pretty surreal feeling. There's a very strong disconnect between working on the piece and then actually thinking about how it's going to be displayed amongst like other works, especially. But it went, I think, as smoothly as it could have gone, at least initially. But being in a public open space, I remember we experienced a lot of wind, which was pretty frustrating. We had to do some like quick fixtures with super glue to reattach some parts, but apart from that, it was pretty good. Yeah, I think it was. I don't know. I tried not to have too much involvement in the work. I found it quite fun to sort of wander around a bit and try and eavesdrop into other people's conversations and listen to how they're interacting with it. One of the things I was sort of worried about was people having a surface level interpretation of it, just based off of the physical objects themselves, without actually reading some of the text or trying to look at the symbolism behind it, which was something that happened a bit, I suppose. A lot of people would focus in on one particular object, and then they then tried to make sense of how everything else could somehow tie into the relevance of that object, rather than looking at the piece as a whole. But it's still, I think the general response was constructive. Yeah, it was cool. A lot of my art teachers came and had a look at it, and they thought it was pretty interesting, 'cause it's so different from what I usually do. Being a part of something so significant, it was a pretty big change from what I was used to. Because I don't know, realistically, I've only been doing art in a serious capacity for about 4 years now, 3-4 years, and going from essentially just making art in my bedroom and just having a couple smaller school exhibitions. It was a huge transition from that to going to one of the most, I don't know, to an internationally recognized event. It was extremely confronting, and it was daunting, but the attention was quite cool. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I think it's also just it's nice being able to interact with different members of the art community, because generally I think you recognize people by their work rather than the person behind it. So actually being able to tie that all together and put some sort of face and personality behind that was really cool. So yeah, it was great.